Back to the Lakers podcast. We're talking about the Disona Diva Centers, and we still got a couple more to go. So we're talking about this one, Yuki. Where are you, Yuki? Here we go. Again, bear with me. There's the Japanese here. We're recording these before the set comes out. Yuki is our white Disona center. She's not blatantly as powerful as a lot of these other white cards in the past. In general, white is just not quite as powerful in the Disona meta in general, which is probably a good thing because white is very obscenely good everywhere else. So a little bit of a power scale down, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a role and something that you can play with it. White's role in Disona very much is either a more proactive sort of mid-range strategy that you can play, or it's a more reactive control strategy that you can play. And I think both have valid options to it. And I actually couldn't figure out for a while where I wanted to land with Yuki specifically. I actually talked to Sirloin Sealed, who got second place at the latest GP, a bit about it because I know he was interested in Yuki as to where he thinks he would have leaned towards, and we chatted for a little bit, and then I think we both kind of came up to the idea that this more reactive control strategy was slightly better for Yuki. And I'll explain why in a second. But I just wanted to put that in a clear to be clear with you guys. There is definitely a valid another build with this where you replace blue with red and you go more of a mid-range strategy, and you still end up pretty well set off with this Yuki deck. But here's Yuki, right? So Yuki is a level 3 white center with the following abilities. At the beginning of your attack phase, if there's 2 or more Disona on your field, and that is really important to note that it's 2 or more, not 3. It doesn't have to be a full field of it. Target level 1 Signy on your opponent. You get to choose one of these. Target level 1 Signy on your opponent's field and return to its hand, or you can target a Signy on the opponent's field and put it into the bottom of the deck at the end of this turn. Its enter ability is lets you look at the top 5 cards of your deck. You can add 1 card, doesn't have to be a Disona, among them to your hand, and then the rest on the bottom in any order. And then you get the Succeed 4, and you get a Signy barrier, which is cool. It just mitigates damage a little bit. So, here's the deal. I took a long while to try to figure out whether or not I wanted to go with mid-range or control with this strategy. Inevitably, I went with control for 2 reasons. One, mid-range, while it enjoys the ability to open up 1 lane every turn, and if it doesn't open up a lane, kind of mess with your opponent's resources for a longer game, the deck that kind of enjoys that a little bit more is a more controlling strategy. And 2, and this is the really big one, since its ability was to put a random Signy on the bottom of the deck, right? Like, not a random Signy, but you know what I'm saying. Like, a Signy on the bottom of the deck at end of turn if it misses the level 1. Then the control strategy cares more about that because over time it can mess with that longer. Also, putting a level 1 Signy into the opponent's hand means that you can discard it later, which is why I ended up going with this strat a little bit more, is basically mitigating what's in the opponent's hand makes this strategy better just overall, in my opinion. So that's why I ended up with this more control strategy. I know that was a long-winded explanation for it, but I wanted to talk about why I ended up with this specific deck type. So you'll notice what I ended up doing here was I ended up, and I probably should change this to be honest with you. I've got dub here. I actually think it probably should be clap, but I think also one of my reasons, I couldn't decide whether I wanted a dub or clap as a 3-stop in this deck. This is definitely a control strat that wants to keep the game going longer, but because you have so many barriers that you're getting, right? Like you're getting a Signy barrier from here, and then Sunspot Memory is also giving you a Signy barrier. I actually think it might be better to run double 1-stops on this deck, because then it just allows you to pace this game a little bit better for yourself, and then inevitably hold off on damage. You can decide whether or not you should have your barriers pop or not. And I guess we should talk about what barriers are too, because this is a new one. Barrier is basically the next time you take damage from either an Elrig or a Signy, depending on if it's a Signy barrier or an Elrig barrier, you don't take that damage. You just sort of, this is like a force field instead. And that's sort of what I wanted to do with this, is I wanted the game to go as long as possible, because the longer the game could go, the more triggers of Yuki's auto ability, at the beginning of the turn, the beginning of the attack phase would trigger, and that would just give you more value, which also led me to want to be more of a control strat, doing kind of like a safe damage every turn, Elrig damage, and then move on. The name of the game is Preventing Damage. This is very much, in a weird way, is a lot like Sachet was, where it's sort of a stall deck, and it's utilizing that, even though I know it's multiple colors, and it's got a little bit of some proactiveness in it. Doesn't necessarily make it any less of a stall deck. So I decided to go with the good old tried and true Madoka Float, Madoka Dub, Wing Slash, Machina Smash combo. This it's just known to get you card value, to get you open holes, to get you damage prevention. It's the best that you could be doing, possibly, and we're trying to give this a more of a long-term back, so there's really no reason to change the things that work. We did, instead of going with, like, let's say, a 2-mode Ultra Superheroes, which is valid, by the way, in this deck. I still think getting yourself your best cards, including a guard, and getting yourself damage in the terms of a refresh is definitely something I still considered playing, regardless, over Sunspot Memory. But I like Sunspot Memory at this point. Might as well double down a bit on the what do you call it, the damage prevention. Plus, it does get you an Elrig from the top 5, which means that, or not an Elrig, excuse me, a Disona from the top 5. So you are still like utilizing some search. And there's a little bit of toolboxing in this deck. There's also some toolboxing Super Lesty Saber. Look, it's a good card. It gets you back a guard. This deck actually prefers to get a couple guards as well, so that way you can get Signy Barrier from your center, Signy Barrier from here, Elrig Barrier from here, and then another guard from here. That basically gives you multiple turns to sponge damage. So I think it's actually pretty good. You're pretty much going to stall, right? Like with this backing, you're going to stall for quite a while. So the main deck kind of reflects that as well. I wanted to use a little bit more of Walling Signy because I knew I was going to reflect damage. Well, then another way to do it is take less damage in the early game. So that's where these Novas come out. So Novas basically are 8,000s, right? That's the idea, is that they're going to be 8,000s walls. And I also have one Guillotine in here too, which it itself can be a 13k. But then also gives all the other Disona on your field plus 2k, which means they can get out of certain ranges, and that actually helps you win a longer game. So it's a value level too, but it helps with the whole walling feature. Now, I'm not making a whole huge thing on walling because I don't really need to. I can stall out just by stalling out some damage. And that's also kind of where Yuki comes in. This is one of the first times we're getting a reliable way to bring back guards to your hand. It has the cost of white, though, so it's not like a small cost at all to bring back, but it is good that it allows you to bring back something. It's got life burst too, which is something that Disona kind of need. There's not a ton of good life bursts in the Disona decks. But swooling back over to the level 1s, we're running 4 Firecrackers. You're going to see pretty much every single one of the decks that I'm making, we're running 4 Firecrackers. If it's got a bunch of Disona, I'm running a Firecrackers in it. It is an obscenely good card. It is probably one of the main reasons Disona's is just a good deck archetype in general. And we're backing it up with Pond Turtle as well. So Pond Turtle is our main form of discard outside of extras, which we also have. So this will help us discard, as well as extras will help us discard. Now, if I really wanted to get cute, I suppose I could have added some Alos Paralukes into the deck, the Disonas. I didn't have any. I didn't put any in there. I suppose you could take out this Tamago for it, or even maybe an Umir for it. Inevitably, I decided to keep the Tamago because I wanted the card draw in this deck. I felt like it needed more card draw. And the Umir's there just to help push sort of late game damage as well. That's just part of our one-ofs. So anyways, yeah, the idea is discard in we have a little bit of discard in Pawn Turtle. We have a little bit of discard in Extra. That should be enough to sort of like get us a little bit longer there. There's a world where you could put some Falulu in this deck, or even Bruno, because again, you don't have to have, according to this, you don't have to have an entire field of Disona for this to trigger. You just need a field of at least 2 Disona to trigger. So the deck is also built around that. You'll notice that I'm running 2 Yukis as well. Aside from it just being cute that Yuki's running her own, Signy. Um, I'm running 2 Yukis because I do not like the level 1 version of what Yuki is. I don't like its life burst. I don't like its enter ability not having the ability to switch lanes. I think Yuki itself is just a good enough card on its own that I'm willing to run it over the Disona version and feel pretty happy about it. But supposedly you could probably take your Yukis out here and add Falulus, like 2 Falulus if you want to do that. Then maybe go over to your Yuki Yukas and take 2 of those out and put Falulus in there instead. That's what I would do if I wanted to go a little bit more ham on the discard, which I don't think is a terrible idea, mind you. The other non Disona card that I'm running is Exias. Again, if I'm running a white deck, I'm running Exias. These cards are just insanely good. I do think they have a certain amount of skill cap. Something I noticed at the GP was that Exias were all over the place. They performed well, but there was just Exias everywhere in those decks. The decks that got lower placement, the decks got higher placement, the decks that got middle placement. There's just Exias in all of them. So it's not necessarily a dumb proof deck. Like you need to know when you're supposed to be playing your Exias. To back it out on the level 3s, also similar to Exia is Connect, which is Yuki's partner Signy. It's a level 3 that says auto at the beginning of each attack phase, target 1 Signy on your opponent's field, and it loses all abilities unless your opponent pays 1. It's just a tax. It's a nice tax, I think. I like it for that. It's not quite as good as Koella is, but once you have Yuki, it becomes way better than Koella, which is at the end of your turn, if there's a Yuki on your field, you can target 1 Signy on the opponent's field, put it to the bottom of its owner's deck. It's also got an enter ability where you can pick 1 other Disona and give it plus 3,000 power from now until the end of your opponent's next turn, which means that you do pump it above the Machina smash range for most decks. So you can get in damage with this as well. It's kind of a nice little balance between there. Its life burst is that you target 1 up Signy on your opponent's field and put it into its owner's trash, which is less good. I'm gonna be honest with you, that life burst misses more often than it hits. But it's okay in the Disona meta that we're coming up, because Disona meta is going to try to open 3 lanes, so this ends up being pretty good. At the beginning of the attack phase, triggering and making something lose its abilities is kind of nice. It's better than when it attacks, because like Koella has that, because it can blank a lot of things that destroy on attack. The ability, but that's not the main reason you play this. The main reason you play this is because it bottom decks a Signy, right? So your hope is that you're either bouncing a Signy with Yuki and then bottom decking another. And generally speaking, you could theoretically have 2 of these, right? So you really could be just massively disrupting your opponent's field in terms of resources, which is why inevitably, again, I leaned myself towards control strategy for this instead of just straight up mid-range. I think mid-range is here, but I think this card becomes significantly less good if you do that. And then that's one of the main reasons why you run Yuki in the first place, is to play these partner Signies. So I think you do a disservice by running a more mid-range strategy with this. Outside of that, we end up with, let's see, some of the leftovers, stragglers that we haven't talked about. Milling over here, right? Milling top 6 is always pretty good. Hopefully you'll be able to recur it a couple times, maybe get a mill damage. If the game is going long enough, then you need less mill in your Elrig deck. But theoretically, if you wanted to, you could swap out the Machina for Urith, and I wouldn't blame you. And then Urith plus the mill on this should be enough to mill out your opponents for 1 refresh damage reliably. And I think that's actually a pretty valid strategy. Then outside of that, we put in some of this Kago Mika, because it does get you back your it does get you back your what do you call it? So your connects. I think connects are pretty good on the field. The other thing that it gets back that I really like is these Donnas. So Donna this is one of the only times I've found using it, although I wanted to use it in some more aggressive strategies too. It's just a little difficult to sneak white into those aggressive strategies because white is not the best Disona color, period. But you're already playing white here, so you can actually play this Disona, which is a good Disona. And that is all of their Signy on your field get plus power. So also, if you've got Connect, you can use Connect to target this, and then Connect also gets buffed. So basically, everything is hugely walling at that point, which is quite strong to be able to just wall out with literally all your Signy. But you get the auto ability of, when your Elrig attacks, you can down 2 up Disona on your field, and then pay white colorless. If you do, you can that Signy, that Elrig loses all of its abilities and you get to up it again, right? So you get to attack a second time, getting some more safe damage in. And I do think damage is, this deck is slow, so getting a little bit of extra damage is something that's definitely worth trying to do. So I like this. I explained that I put the Tamago in here for extra draw, and I put the Umir here for a little bit extra damage, because I felt like the deck needs it. And that's your deck. I think basically it's going to play a lot similar to Sachet Stall. I don't know if it's better than Sachet Stall, but it is different, and it's probably worth trying. I'm definitely going to give it a go at least once.